Hey everyone, Cal with Andrew Hilton here, and time for a really cool little brewery profile tasting. Now, this is from McAloney's single malt whiskey, but not single malt Scotch producer off of Vancouver Island. But they started out as a brewery. This is Twa Dogs Brewery. Now, Twa Dogs does make some very traditional, proper IPAs and Pilsners and Blonde Ales and Lagers, and now we're not doing any of those. We're doing all the dumb stuff. So we have 4 beers in front of us right here. We're going to start out with a beer that I still haven't entirely figured out. It doesn't say anything. It just says it's raspberry creme brulee original recipe. I'm sure there's an explanation on the back of what it is, but I'm very curious that there's no explanation on the front other than it's 8.4%. Next up we have their Blackberry Blonde. I love blackberries. Blackberries are probably my favorite fruit. They're rich, they're a little bit tannic, they have a beautiful haunting aroma. But as a blonde ale, I'm curious if they've put enough into this beer that the blackberry actually translates, or if it's just gonna be a boring ass blonde ale that's kind of pinkish purple, which is the other way it can go. Oh, the Salish Cyclone Tropical Fruit Explosion. Again, doesn't say. Is it a tropical fruit sour? Is it a tropical fruit IPA? I know what it is because it is on the back. Now, it is 4.5% alcohol, which should be a clue. And then to conclude, the Lavender Saison. This one does what it says on the box. It's a French style Saison. It's very dry, it's very spicy, it's got lovely peppery notes. And then it's contrasted with Lavender. Now we've had Lavender Saison on before. Moody Brewing did one. It's about Saison yeast versus Lavender and how it all fits together. I think that's gonna be an interesting conversation. But fun beers, McAloney's, Twa Dogs Brewing. Gonna be a lot of fun. Wednesday, September 21st at 6 o'clock. We'll see you then. Media Boutique. All right, well, sorry about that, everyone. I had to deal with something and I kind of lost track of time there. Apologies to everybody. Let me get the comments loaded and everything else. Normally I'm more prepared than this. Welcome. I really hope we don't have any first-time viewers because they are now last-time viewers as well. So here we are with, yes, one Twa Dogs Brewery tasting. Now, who is Twa Dogs? Now, Twa Dogs is the brewery arm of McAloney's Caledonian Distillery on Vancouver Island. Now, you would definitely know that because if you ever try to do any research whatsoever on Twa Dogs Brewery, everything is, oh yeah, there's this really great distillery, and here's this 5-page article about it, and here's their war with the Scotch Whisky Association, and here's Graham McAloney's life story, and oh yeah, I guess they have a brewery. The only thing that almost every article repeats is, well, all of the beers names are from a line in a Robbie Burns poem. And I strongly doubt that Robbie Burns had anything about a raspberry creme brulee. So maybe the one piece of consistent information out there isn't perhaps as reliable as we might hope. Welcome to Twa Dogs. If you thought our beginning was a disaster, we haven't even had the beers yet. So, our tasting order tonight is going to be the Salish Cyclone, which is a tropical fruited sour. We have the Lavender Saison. We have the Blackberry Brown Ale. And we finally have a dark ale that is done up like a raspberry creme brulee. It's quite sweet. It's about as dark as a porter. So, what are we getting ourselves into here? Well, let's pour ourselves some of the triple fruited sour here and let's get started. Twa Dogs, of course, part of the Graham McAloney empire, which again is very loudly about the distillery and quietly also has a brewery attached. They got their start in 2016. Most of the initial reviews and articles that I heard talking or read talking about it were all from 2017. So it looks like they got their start in fairly late 2016, or maybe everything that I see like in terms of their website is like founded in 2016, but I'm wondering if perhaps their production started in 2016 and sales to the public started the year after. Like I said, based on Vancouver Island, they have a very interesting beer lineup. Now, I will be very honest here. I did not go for the most typical beers in their list. So let me give you a little bit of past history on our Twa Dogs tasting here. Devin and I have been talking about a Twa Dogs tasting now for probably about 16, 18 weeks. And, you know, it starts out when we sit down on a Monday morning, it's like, well, we have to figure out what next week's beer tasting is going to be and order all the beers and pick a topic and find out something interesting to talk about, at least tangentially interesting anyway. And it's always been the case the last 4 months roughly that it's been, oh, well, yeah, there's enough beer for like a Twa Dogs tasting. We've never done Twa Dogs. And then we find something else that we think is a little cooler, or there's a brand new brewery, or Cabin comes up with something really insane and we have to build a tasting around it. So Twa Dogs has been like the backup tasting for several months at this point, and we're just now getting around to it. And well, I think these beers are certainly very interesting, so let's get right to it. The Salish Cyclone is, of course, a kettle sour. They are doing this with pineapple, mango, passion fruit, and lime. If that sounds very familiar, that's broadly 4 out of the 5 fruits they used for the... Actually, no, it was called 4 Alive, so it was actually all 4 of the fruits the cabin used. Kettle sour, of course, is a lightly soured, low alcohol style. This one clocking in at 4.5%. This should be bright, fresh, lots of tropical fruit notes, a little bit of acidity coming off of that kettle souring process. This should not be a particularly challenging beer, but it should be immediately likable. Well, that's certainly a beer that I drank today. You know, I don't like being mean. I really don't. And I was going to say being mean for the Lavender Saison because, wow, wait till we get to that. That's not great. I'll be very honest. I tasted that last. I figured we'd go through these 3, and then this would actually be the last beer. When I tasted them about 20 minutes ago, I actually took it all the way to the start. Yeah, I think Craig's comment of apricot maybe is quite apt. I struggle to pick out a single defined fruit character here. And the other note that I would actually make is, if you told me this was a plain kettle sour that hadn't been fruited, I might actually believe you. Is there anyone out there, anyone at all, that is picking up like a distinct fruit note separate from like just all kettle sours, even like dry hopped ones like the cellophane flowers from Establishment, or pardon me, the old school Blind Man kettle sour? They had a fruity component. This kind of doesn't.
Nerds.
Yeah, nerds, like the candy nerds. That's not that bad. There is something, ironically, it's none of the fruits in the description. I actually get some peach, like some underripe peach in the mouth. Maybe that's tying to the mango, but I would not say I get passion fruit, lime, or I could see pineapple, maybe. Not sure how I feel about that one. That one's,
What fruits do they say are?
They say in order pineapple, mango, passion fruit, lime. Also, in the ingredients list, they don't say that. They say water, barley malt, wheat malt, oat, hops, yeast, lactobacillus plantarum, and then fruit puree. So they don't actually say whether it's a blend of those fruits, if they're buying like a tropical fruit punch sour pre-mixed blend, which is absolutely the thing that does exist. You can buy those sorts of things. Or if they're buying 4 separate fruit purees and adding them. I
get a little bit of lime.
You get the lime?
A little bit.
Okay.
A little bit of lime.
I mean, if I go really hunting for it, I can get this like weak, tepid lime thing on the nose, but I don't really get it in the mouth. The mouth is kind of like underripe peach and maybe pineapple.
Yeah, it's not very, it doesn't jump out at you for sure.
No, that does not grab me. Okay. Well, soft start. Now for the beer I thought was going to be really controversial, the Lavender Saison. Now, we've had a lavender beer before. We had a Moody Brewing one. And you know what? We tasted it alongside the Flamingos, or Flamingosa. I thought it was okay, the lavender sour. It was a lot of lavender. I think my comments at the time were, that's actually a nice use of lavender, and I couldn't drink a whole can. Because I don't mind lavender. I like it in like very tiny amounts on top of like a dessert with a lot of berry flavors. I don't mind a little bit of lavender in a tea blend. I've had other lavender beers, and Moody's was quite good. Let's see how this goes. Now, the color's quite interesting for a couple of reasons. Now, if you've been watching the channel for a while, you know that Saisons tend to be a bit of a mixed bag of different types of malt. It can contain wheat, barley, rye. I've seen them with triticale. I've seen them with all kinds of things, certainly oats. So there's really no right or wrong way to do a malt bill for a Saison, but contemporary Saisons do tend to be a little bit paler than this. And I'm wondering, I keep wanting to say that this darker color is maybe like a bit of purple from the lavender leaching up, but holding it up to the light, I'm not getting like pinks. I'm not getting purples. I think this is just like an amber grain bill, which is odd for a Saison.
Do you want to hold it up for a second?
Yeah, I can hold it up again. Now that Aaron's done, you know, on Twitter.
Very in-depth.
Okay. But yeah, it's an odd color. And in the nose, I mean, I don't think anybody would mistake this this lavender for being anything else, but it doesn't come off in any way like the Moody Lavender Sour does. This comes off to me more like some of the tea beers we've had. What was it called? The Afternooner was the tea beer from the other brewery in Edmonton that's not SYC or Blind Enthusiasm or shoot, I can't remember the name of it. But we had a tea beer from Edmonton. The other tea beer, of course, that we all know and love is King's English by Annex. This reminds me more of those than it does the lavender sour from Moody. Yeah, I think you poured yourself too much.
Yeah, I think I did. I get nerds again.
You get nerds again? I wonder if that's a house yeast thing. Oh, screw you.
It's just for Devin.
Now the mouth is louder. I most certainly get a lot more. Yours was super full, free beer. And yes, Chris, Situation Brewing, thank you so much. Thank you. That was just eluding me. Now, curious. So they do say they're adding orange peel as well to this, and apparently there's quite a bit of rye. Now the rye certainly would give it a bit of an orange cast, that's certainly true. It should also give it a bit of spiciness. Ooh. You know, it's funny, the first time I poured this for myself, I was like, wow, everyone is going to hate this. This, believe it or not, is growing on me. This, I think, did not start well and did not finish well and did not have a great middle. This, the first time I tasted it was like, oh God, no, please don't make me drink an entire one of these. As I get into this, I think I'm getting it. Yeah, grandmother's bathroom is not a bad call, like that particular potpourri smell, which I think is the lavender and the orange. I'm certainly not saying I'm rushing out to get a 4-pack of this tonight. But in a world where like I really like King's English and Mill Street lemon tea beer exists and the Situation Afternooner exists, I kind of have some time for this. I wouldn't want like more than one, but you know, if I was at McAloney's or I was at a pub and they're out of everything good and it was choice between the sour and this, I'd have a pint of that. Yes.
What is Bilston Creek Farm?
They talk something about a special Lithuanian farmhouse ale yeast. I'm wondering if that's maybe where it comes from, or perhaps the Bilston Creek farm is where they harvested the lavender. You know what? I straight up missed that. I caught the collaboration for next week with the Acme Meat Market, but I straight up missed that this was a collaboration beer, Aaron. I don't know.
Yeah.
Nope, I straight up missed that. That's my mistake. That is not doing enough research. And Megan's saying that, yeah, as a lavender lover, you were really looking forward to this, and it's maybe not delivering enough lavender. Do you think there's enough lavender?
No, it's missing. Definitely.
I get a pretty tea-like thing, and I like that there's orange peel in there to set off the bitterness of the tea.
I understand the orange peel. It's got like that orange peel oiliness.
Yeah.
But the balance is weird.
You know what? That's a good point.
Too malty or something like that. Like I want it tangier. You know, King's English is like that. It's got that nice citrus like brightness to it. This, I feel like orange was maybe the wrong decision, personally.
Okay, I could see that. Maybe lemon would be lighter and brighter.
Right.
And maybe this malt bill was a bit heavy. Is it also higher in alcohol? It says strong beer, but that's anything over 5. 6.7. I think that between the big stiff malt bill, I don't know anything about Lithuanian farmhouse yeast. That can't be the same thing as Creek yeast because that's Swedish. No. This is more appealing than it was on the first sip. But yeah, I think Aaron actually hit the nail on the head and said it was a balance issue. Yeah, there is something out of balance with this. I think it lines up better with other tea beers we've had than it does with other lavender beers. And certainly, I wouldn't put this into a Saison tasting because while it may be technically a Saison, it has nothing in common with any other Saison in the store. And again, it's not a tea beer, but if we're going to put it in the tea beer category, I don't think this stands up to King's English or Afternoon. I just don't. Interesting, challenging. I love the unique ingredients. I love that it's brewed with rye. I love that it's brewed with a Lithuanian farmhouse yeast. I want to do way more research on that because that sounds cool as hell. But yeah, I think just nothing here was done horribly. I think it holds together as an experiment better than I thought it would. But yeah, I think if this was maybe tested a little more, run through a few other trials, this might have showed up a little bit more balanced and a little cleaner. I think this is 95% of the way there, but it kind of stumbles on the last hurdle and ends up being a lot of things, but none of them is particularly a beer I want a second can of, or really even to finish that one. Okay, this one's fun. And I thought we were going to end up talking a lot more about the yeast on this because of the whole Lithuanian farmhouse yeast. This beer, to me, has an odd yeast note. So this is a Blackberry blonde ale. So if you want to think of this as Twa Dogs' version of Fernie's What the Huck at 5% alcohol, it's a dead simple blonde ale. Throw in some blackberries. What the Huck has been one of the best-selling craft beers in BC, if not the best-selling craft beer in BC, for like 15 years. How could you go wrong? Anybody else getting a really weird thing, like a plastic vanilla thing off the yeast note on this? Because they say it's just barley, water, hops, yeast, blackberry juice concentrate. Anybody getting like a weird bourbon barrel vanilla phenolic thing here? And I think it has to be the yeast. Yeah, there's something in this, and it's not like they swung for the fences with this, and I think they just missed. I actually think it smells better out of the can. I think it smells cleaner to me. And believe me, I did not go into this thinking that this was going to be a hit job on Macaloni's Twa Dogs. I really didn't. I went with the weirder stuff because I was in the mood for like a fun tasting. Like, we're not doing their base blonde ale. We're not doing their IPA. We're going for all of their science experiments, and that is by design. But yeah, this is kind of ended up being a bit of a hit job on Macaloni's because that it didn't come through, that just missed, and Wow, I don't know what is quite going on with this one because there is a note in this that is deeply unpleasant. Yeah,
I don't even know if I can drink this.
yeah,
Like tasting it, it's like cheese, feet. Fucking take your pick.
well, okay, you said cheese and feet. There is certainly something.
Nutritional yeast. I don't know.
Nutritional yeast is an interesting one, and I was actually kind of going that same way. It feels like maybe they had some real autolysis problems, that the yeast started dying in the tank and they didn't get the beer off quickly enough. This kind of tastes like a homebrew that sat on the primary fermenter too long and started to pick up some really off-putting primary fermentation yeast trube characteristics to it. Because it does finish like a homebrew where they let the filling tube get a little too close to the big mass of dead yeast at the bottom. This definitely has a used yeast flavor. But let's talk about the positives. The blackberry note is very pretty. The nose, it is present, but I think, again, that yeasty autolytic characteristic, which is actually the same. It's funny, we're talking about this. What are the things we usually words we use to describe like the autolytic characteristic in champagne or in long-term barrel-aged Chardonnays? Yeasty, cheesy, footy, stinky. These are characteristics that we're very, very used to when we're talking about champagne, and in that context, they're very, very good things. In this context, which I think this is a yeast issue, we're getting those same things, and we're expecting like a 5% blackberry blonde. We are not expecting a beer we are going to have to think about, and this is throwing some weird stuff at us, and I don't think, first of all, I don't think it's deliberate at all. I definitely think this is a mistake on the brewery's part. I don't think that anybody's sitting at home at Twa Dogs and like, he's completely misunderstanding my autolysis blackberry blonde ale. They're not saying that. This is definitely a mistake. But it's funny how like one little tiny mistake like that can end up throwing off the entire beer. And that's kind of what I'm digging for here, Craig, is if they cleaned up the yeast note. There's the bones of a better beer here, although a very simple and very crowd-pleasing beer that I think is better than the Kettle Sour, better than the Lavender Saison. I just think there's a brewing flaw with this one. Oh, and you're getting a syrupy, sweet canned fruit taste. Cheap red wine, that's... And actually Deirdre's right there too.
Though, didn't he? Chris has a different batch.
Oh, right. He would, wouldn't he?
Yeah. So it could be our batch that's a bit weird.
It could also, I mean, Macaloni's is not a top-selling brewery in Alberta. I would be surprised if other stores had a different batch on the shelves at the same time.
Right.
Especially if this was something that was on the shelves 12 months of the year, sure, but I think this is just a summer seasonal. Yeah, I could see something of an artificial fruit characteristic. I also think that while this isn't a sour, there's about as much like berry fruit sweetness characteristic as there is in, say, Jamrock. And I hesitate to compare this to Jamrock, but it's because that autolytic characteristic is kind of coming off as like fake vanilla, that the vanilla blackberry thing does, unfortunately, and quite unintentionally on their part, invite comparison. If you're dumping, Aaron, mine too, please. Does quite unintentionally and unfortunately draw a comparison to Jamrock, which obviously is company that this beer can't run in. Cool idea. I can see with the success of Fernie What the Huck why they'd go for exactly this style. Maybe if I was in Victoria, on a patio, it's 100 degrees outside, and this beer was a good example of itself, I think this would be perfectly refreshing. What's in front of us now? Well, as I often say, look for it soon in a clearance rack near you. That is not something that's sticking around. Yep. Now, before we get to the raspberry creme brulee, yes, Craig's on the ball. Let's talk about what we have coming up next week. Oh, you found my establishment glass. Thank you, Aaron.
I think so.
I'm going to pour myself some of this to get some of that flavor out of my mouth. So, these are two different breweries with two very, very different philosophies. SYC, and anyone who's from SYC watching, apologies for this gross overgeneralization perhaps, but what have SYC's last two releases been? they do kettle sours, they do IPAs. They're very much on trend with whatever is super popular. Now that's not a bad thing. Italian Pils started to heat up. Their Pontificato was actually the first in the Alberta market to really take off. Now everyone and their mum seemingly has an Italian-style Pilsner. They're not purely followers of the market, but at least not in Alberta, but they're followers more of the global market. So SYC, we have 2 beers from them, one of which is a sour IPA, which... Does anybody really want to tell me what the difference between a sour IPA and a dry hopped kettle sour is? Because I'm sure as hell not sure there's a difference, and I think they're 2 names for the exact same thing. Now, of course, dry hop kettle sours don't sell in this market, whereas I sold out of sour saturation in about 8 days. So this is very much on trend right now. I think this peachy keen sour IPA is pretty cool. Sour IPA lately has not been my style, but I did want to talk about it, and I didn't taste Establishment Sour IPA. I don't think we tasted Sour Saturation. It is starting to get some real traction in the market. I wanted to taste one, and SYC had one, and I do generally trust them to make one. The other thing you got right now is a Cold Red IPA. Cold IPA was a very, very short-lived style, which usually referred to a cooler fermentation temperature as well as using cryo hops. And red IPAs, or what they used to be called Imperial Red Ales, really kind of had a hot minute about 15 years ago, particularly in the American Southwest. This is a style that's kind of like a bright red lollipop characteristic and then just big spicy hop notes on top. When it's done well, it's very, very good. And I have noticed some buzz on this style starting to creep back in the last year because SYC is always on top of trends. On the other hand is we don't believe in beer styles. We don't follow trends. We just do weird madness and people buy it anyway because we're great brewers. Blind enthusiasm. Now we have their Nordlichter Lager, which I had with Devin a couple of weeks ago. Outstanding lager. This is a Czech style lager at 3.5% alcohol. Yes, it's light in body. It's 3.5% alcohol. But it's still got some nice crispness. It's got some nice crackeriness. It's got a big punch of Saaz hops. It's got proper bitterness. It's got a long finish. This, for 3.5% alcohol, is a damn nice beer. Finally, we have another collab, and this one I knew was a collab, so hey, I'm 1 for 2. This is the Come Acme Bro. So this is a collaboration with the Acme Meat Market it's the Acme Meat Market, right? Or the Acme Meat Market. Now, this is to celebrate their 100th anniversary. Now, Acme, of course, is the name of the store. Bro, however, is a beer we've never had down here. Bro is short for brown, but again, they don't like beer styles. So even in the description for Bro, they say, is it a stout? Is it a porter? Is it a brown ale? Is it an old ale? We won't say. Now, this isn't just Bro. This is a lagered version of Bro. And if you're saying, a darkish beer that's lagered that they don't want to give a name to, doesn't that sound a lot like Hoyne Dark Matter? And yes, it sounds exactly like Hoyne Dark Matter, which is broadly what this is, and I actually like this quite a bit better than Hoyne Dark Matter. So we've got a couple of different new expressions of cool IPA, a rockin' good, let's call it a super low alcohol Pils, and Alberta's answer to Hoyne Dark Matter. That's coming up next week. Now, bigger news, of course, and I think most people watching already have their tickets, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. Coming up on Saturday, October the 1st at 9:30 a.m. here, and that's when the bus leaves, folks. It's 9 o'clock gathering, 9:30 for the bus. We are going to Calgary. $120 ticket price gets you on the bus. We're taking the bus up to Calgary. We're visiting Cabin, Annex, 88, and Establishment. You're going to have a sampler platter and someone to kind of talk you through the brewery, maybe give a little tour, and then turn you loose for an hour and 15 minutes in the brewery where you can hang out, try your favorite beers, try some new beers, and then we'll move on to the next spot. So nobody's driving, nobody's doing anything they have to be a responsible adult. It's just a nice day up in Calgary. We get you there, we make sure you're drank up real good, we bring you home, and if you want more beers, you want to buy a burger at Little Empire, that's on you, but at least you're right there and you didn't have to worry about getting up and back. So that's going to be kind of all day on Saturday, October 1st. $120 ticket price gets you every single thing, no GST on that, just $120, and away we go. And I poured myself this one I shouldn't have because I'm ready to drink the raspberry creme brulee. Oops. Life's hard. Okay, so Twa Dogs Original recipe, raspberry creme brulee, just as the original bard spoke about it. Sorry, I have to bring it up because it's in so many of the articles. I think because Macaloni's has almost nothing to say about Twa Dogs, every author either was just aping off another article that mentioned it and just thought it was a cute throw-in, or it was in like their official press release about their beers and they all copied it down. But that is clearly not the case whatsoever. I do not think he spoke of a Salish Cyclone or a raspberry creme brulee or a blackberry blonde ale. And it's not like there's like, you know, a cool Robbie Burns name for these beers in like, you know, the subtext. It's just the Melodies series, which fine, but here we are. Now, ingredients on this, we do have raspberry puree, we have vanilla bean. Thought it said vanilla bean allergen, but no, it's allergen, contains lactose. It's on a separate line. But yes, they did add raw vanilla bean, they added raspberry puree. The kind of chocolatey characteristic is going to be coming from the malt. Alcohol is quite high on this, so it's definitely in the imperial category. If I was going to put a style on it, I'd say like imperial brown, maybe an imperial porter. And again, this style of beer is surprisingly hard to make well. They get very sickly sweet very quickly. They can come off very boozy and very sharp and very medicinal and astringent very easily. They do not often come off as like a thing I immediately want to drink. And it's not something I order very often. Now, I believe we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago. Kind of the originator of this style was Southern Tier Brewing out of upstate New York, and their very first like creme brulee imperial stouts, which they followed on with like cappuccino imperial stout, chocolate milkshake imperial stout. They had all these imperial stout flavorings, and they were all named after desserts. And then following on that, about 8-10 years later, Rogue came out with their Voodoo Donut, you know, their maple bacon donut imperial stout, which was absolutely disgusting. And then they turned that Voodoo Donut series into an entire range of dessert-themed beers. Thank God it seems like we're finally past all that stupidity, but when they're done well, I do think there's a place for these style of beers. I comfortably think this is the best beer of the four, although that is a worryingly low bar. And this is nice. I mean, it's not a style of beer I reach for very often. It's not something I'd buy all the time. But I think that the raspberry actually comes off quite tart. It cuts through all the big sticky sweet thing. The vanilla bean does not come off as terribly artificial. It does not come off as plasticky. It's also not way over the top. The vanilla is there and it's accentuating, which honestly, vanilla bean goes so far when you add a tiny amount that I'll bet they maybe added 2-3 beans to the whole batch, and because they were so restrained, it actually turns out, yeah, it can really overwhelm a beer very quickly.
This is bad.
First beer where I taste what I'm supposed to. Yeah, you're not wrong.
Yeah.
You are not wrong. Well, I've never had a lavender saison made with Lithuanian farmhouse yeast and rye before. Maybe that's exactly what that... Maybe if, 100 brewers were given those ingredients in some bizarre Iron Chef sort of format, that might be the best one they came up with. But, yeah. I'll set this one aside as the first beer that it's supposed to know what it's supposed to taste. It tastes like it's supposed to. God, that took 3 tries. I'm going to set this aside because I don't really know what that's supposed to taste like. Of these 3, yes, I 100% agree. This one definitely does what it says on the box. This box is just confusing and God only knows, but this does what it says on the box. I get Tootsie Roll on this, which I'm really liking.
This was your all the things worry.
This wasn't all the things worry, yes, because I really thought this could, if they'd gone over the top on the lactose, which there's a distinct chance because it's like the 5th ingredient. Like there's more lactose in there than there's hops.
Oh, yeah.
So this could have come off very sweet. It could have come off, I don't know where that's coming from. It could have come off just really, really bad and really sticky and really nasty. But it's not. It's actually coming off fairly balanced.
It seems like these styles of beer are like kind of walking a razor's edge.
I don't think these are easy beer styles to brew.
Blow it easy.
Yeah. You know, it's one of those truisms that I started saying when I very first started this beer tasting series was, it sure is easy to brew an imperial stout aged in a bourbon barrel with chocolate and cherries and vanilla and everything else. It's like, that's something that I've heard repeated ad nauseum from people. And at this point, I'm very willing to just call it complete horseshit. We have seen enough terrible examples of big imperial stouts brewed with wild ingredients that are just dog shit. And the point of that comparison is that, you know, it's supposed to be so hard to brew a delicate lager. You know, sure, if you're adding all these adjuncts, it's easy to hide mistakes. No, it's not. It just makes it worse. I'll tell the story of, I came home one night. I walked home from the Owl. This is when I was still living on the west side. And I decided in my cheap but inebriated state I was going to make hamburger helper. And I burnt it. And I kept insisting that I can fix this. So I had ketchup and Worcester and mustard. And I kept adding things to the point where my girlfriend at the time made me actually stop and just go to bed, because the food had stopped to basically be food. I think there's very much that temptation when you have a beer where you're doing a, say, chocolate bourbon barrel-aged imperial stout. Not only have you had to add a ton of money in terms of brewing the beer, chocolate's expensive. Bourbon barrels are tremendously expensive. If it comes out and you're like, oh, I hate this, the next obvious step would be like, what if we made it a vanilla chocolate bourbon barrel aged stout? And you keep kind of sunk cost fallacying yourself into trying to fix something. I think we do occasionally see beers sneak through that are like that, where it's like, oh, I hate this, let's put it in the foeder. Or I hate this, let's make it a chili pepper beer. This, I think, was very carefully designed, very carefully done. And while it's not my style of beer, and it's perhaps still too warm outside for a lot of people to feel like it, that works. And I think that the truism that it's very easy to brew a high alcohol dark beer with a lot of adjuncts, I think we have very firmly put to bed between All the Things and several other beers very much like All the Things. This just works, and it works very, very well. I fully expected this was going to be my least favorite beer on the table because it did not sound appealing to me. But hands down, I think that's the best thing here. I'm going to give a very, you're lucky to get it, silver medal, I think, to the Kettle Sour. Third place to the Lavender Saison, because I don't know what else to do with it. And a did not finish to the Blackberry Blonde. Not because it's just a bad idea or a bad recipe. I just think there was something wrong with that batch, and it's not fair to score it. Blackstrap Molasses is an interesting point. All right. For me, that's not raspberry jam. It's more like raspberry coulis that you get on a cheesecake or get over a piece of chocolate cake in like a semi-fancy restaurant. The sort of restaurant that is serving you chocolate cake from a box that it gets from its food delivery company, but is jazzing up with little dots of like whipped cream around the edge of the plate and pouring raspberry coulis over it and then charging you $17. It's that sort of raspberry note. It's very pretty. Like there is a lot to like here. I'm enjoying this beer. I'm curious to see what everybody else's rankings are here, because I don't envy you ranking these ones. It's a tough crowd. Aaron, what are your rankings?
I think this is a learning episode.
All right, it's a learning episode.
Yeah, I think I like the raspberry creme brulee the best. So, the other, I absolutely hated the blackberry blonde ale.
So 4.
That was it was a disaster in my opinion.
Okay.
Lavender Saison was terrible.
The
So,
3.
Yeah, and the Salish Cyclone was passable, but nondescript. Like,
That's,
yeah.
you've summed up basically how I feel about them too.
Yeah.
That was fun. I'd never bring that in. I don't know what's going on there, and that just has a brewing flaw.
Yeah.
1, then confused. All right, Greg. Well, we're all confused and horny. But you know, sorry, was it frightened and horny? Was that Joe Quimby from The Simpsons? That's what I was going for.
Yeah.
But I realized it was suddenly really out of context. For people who don't know, I just randomly quote Simpsons episodes.
Write down the time code. For
Yeah, we're writing that one down. All right. Well, I'm blushing, so here we are. I think we'll call it there because there's no recovering from that. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week for our pseudo trip to Edmonton and on October 1st for our actual trip to Calgary. Thank you, as always, for tuning in to Weird Beers and Completely Inappropriate Humor Wednesdays. I'm Kyle with Andrew Hilton, but I'll deny it if you ever point that out. This has been Aaron and Sky, and we'll see you next week. Take care.